over again by not going to vote is not going to change that. The only way you can send a message legitimately is by going to vote. Now, I hear the young people who are disappointed in the sense that they perhaps have not heard articulated in the same manner in which they'd like to be articulated, the plans about taking the future forward. These are going to be shared. We try to share some of them on Facebook and on the internet. But unless you begin to share your ideas and express your either approval or disapproval about the way, the form in which the form of development that this country is taking, even if it's just for the purposes of saying every school should have an internet laboratory, you need to let that view be known. There's nothing political about saying, I think this is necessary for my future. Mm-hmm. And therefore, on that basis, I would say you need to have your voice heard. We're not asking you to endorse any party, but you need to at least articulate your position on the future. And the best way to do that is to go out and vote.
Let me just go into the chat room for a second. Renita said, I am so happy everyone is calling for calm and peace. I would like to hear more calls to honor Mr. Ewing by voting. Renita again, what key performance indicators were used to determine the so-called growth? I guess that probably was a question for Dr. Ramsarup. Is that something you want to take a stab at, Nigel?
I can certainly take a stab at that. But you know what happens now? Everybody has an issue about how you actually assess growth, because we've heard that we've had consistently between 3.2 and 4% growth over the last, I don't know, X number of years. But like I said, you know, growth, apart from the indicators that you use or the bases or indices that you use to assess growth, part of the issue there is there's no point having double-digit growth in your society if 80 to 90% of your society is not feeling that growth, is not participating in the growth. If 80% of your community is not getting better health care, is not getting better social services, does not have access to quality education. So growth as itself, I hate to say this, is not an indicator that the society is improving. What it says is that on the economic numbers, somebody is getting extremely wealthy, but it doesn't necessarily indicate that that is being shared. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, the CDB representative, the head of the CDB bank, who visited Ghana, actually made that specific point. So in terms of that, and just to respond to something Renita said, one of the slogans that came out of the assassination of Mr. Ewing is only the ballot can stop the bullet. So he's saying to people, the only way you can actually stop this madness that is going on here, these assassinations, these unsolved crimes, everything that has led to Guyana being where it is if you go and vote. Because at the end of the day, it's only the ballot that will stop the bullet.
Sam said restoring confidence in the legal and judicial system is going to be a huge undertaking. Can you say briefly what are some of the most immediate steps that will be taken to restore that confidence?
Sure. Well, that really is for whoever the Attorney General will be. But I mean, I certainly think there's some pretty obvious steps that have to be taken. Confidence in the judiciary is at an all-time low. People have the perception, which is aided by the way we act, that, for example, key judicial appointments are done or politically done. So you have, for example, the president, who now with requires the consent of the leader of the opposition to confirm both the chancellor and the chief justice. So automatically that puts both of the candidates for that position into the political arena. And once you've got serious objection from one side or the other, it means that there's a perception that that candidate is going to be beholden to one political party or the other. That has to be changed. It's only in Guyana, essentially it's only in Guyana, perhaps in Trinidad, that you actually have this big debate about who heads judiciary. In Guyana, for example, political cases go before judges, and then the integrity of the judge comes into question because the case is political. Now, the way to start building confidence in that is that first of all, the identification of persons for the office of judge has to be done, one, in a transparent manner, two, the Judicial Service Commission, which actually in effect makes recommendations for appointments to judges, has to be far more accountable than it presently is in identifying candidates. So, for example, criteria, something as basic as criteria. You should have a list of criteria, not just basic criteria, 10-year service, a list of criteria that is required for somebody to become eligible for consideration as a judge. That criteria should be published. It should be widely circulated. Two, you should advertise for applicants. Widely circulated. Two, you should advertise for applicants, because then you know that the applicants know what the criteria is, and then the panel that identifies and participates in the selection of the judges needs to be a lot more varied. You just can't have three ex officio members, the Chancellor, the Chief Justice, and the head of the Public Service Commission. Then you've got a representative for the Bar Association and somebody who the President in his absolute discretion appoints. There needs to be set guidelines for promotion of judges. It can't be, the Chancellor and the Chief Justice decide they want to promote John Smith and Mary Lou. You've got to have a track record of decisions that are erudite. Your decisions have to be subject to peer review, whether in the university, in the law faculties throughout the Caribbean. And for Guyana, I think we need to advertise in the Commonwealth for judges, because we may not have all the talent here, either that wants to go on the bench or that is available to go on the bench. And therefore, for example, in Belize, they have had a Chief Justice who came from, I think it was Sierra Leone, Justice Conte, and some other persons who gave excellent service to Belize. And we need to start moving towards that sort of system where we attract the best and the brightest in the Commonwealth, so at least we can start to bring back to our judiciary some level of confidence that they are fully insulated from the society and fully insulated from the political purpose, the political environment. I'm not saying that they are influenced by it, but Guyana, being as highly suspicious as it is, and being as highly cynical as it is, has a very, very cautious view of the judiciary and its susceptibility. The recent incident where one of the magistrates found the Prime Minister's son guilty and was fired on the day she was supposed to sentence him, that does not add any confidence whatsoever to the magistracy. How can the magistrate who finds the Prime Minister's son guilty and is about to sentence him get fired on the day she's supposed to sentence him? That does not add. So, and for me, that certainly leads to certain questions that need to be put at the door of the Judicial Service Commission, certainly as to the timing of the termination of the services of this magistrate, and whether there were any other issues that might have impacted upon their decision.
In the chat room, Sam asked, would you serve if nominated for AG?
My answer to Sam is that they are better qualified persons than I am to serve.
Nigel, there's an old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. You travel a lot, and I mentioned this to Peter Ramsroop earlier on, around the country. What is the state of our villages? What are you hearing as you travel the country?
Oh, someone, if you were to just come and do one trip in the country, you'd be very depressed. The state of the villages, and this is irrespective of cultural, ethnic, or not necessarily economic, but cultural, ethnic, or social background, the state of our villages is poor. There are no structures in the villages. The old village councils and village elders that had an impact on the development of the villages don't exist. Those structures don't exist. And then you've got a lot of young people who are growing up in communities where there's no guidance. So what happens is that young people, in their exuberance, start to experiment with various things, whether it's narcotics, whether it's behavior that's less than conventional or perhaps bordering on illegal. And you end up, when you couple that with the fact that there's a lot of unemployment in the villages along the coast in Demerara, in Essequibo and Berbice, it is not a pretty picture. There has not been a lot of job creation in Guyana, 80% of our best young people who come out of the university migrate. So if you start with that as a benchmark, you can imagine what is going on at a slightly different level in the villages.
Sam said he didn't answer the question, but that's okay. Raquel TC said, the judicial system is a mess in Guyana. I pray that we see a system restored in the near future as much hinges on this for the development of Guyana. Nigel, you know, when we get to talking, time just seems to just fly out. But I have to ask you this. If Guyana, as it is, if Guyana remains unchanged, if the government remains unchanged, what frightens you the most? What are you most frightened of, sorry?
If the government remains unchanged?
Yes. That's a big if.
You just imagine waking up on May 13th after they have announced that the People's Progressive Party has been returned to office. And if you are not a supporter of that party, given the statements that have emanated out of Bible John, given the demonstrated actions of the government over the past 22 years, you know that there is no place for anybody other than the people who have supported the government. And unfortunately, in Guyana, where politics is a zero-sum game, where the PPP would now have 100% of the executive power, what will happen is, I believe, people are going to be even further disenfranchised, further economically discriminated against, and there's going to be a very, very large sense of hopelessness in the community, or in certainly the sections of the community that have not supported the government. And given the fact that the government in the last parliament indicated that it was not willing to compromise on anything, that is going to be, at the minimum, replaced by hubris, which will lead to great disaffection in the community. That's my assessment.
Raquel TC said, I speak here from the standpoint of Citizens Against Rape, where we see a very low conviction rate for rapists. And this is just one of many areas that need to change. Harold said, with all the need for infrastructure in the villages, why aren't projects being identified and contractors be required to hire the villagers to help in the development of their own village?
I'm glad that gentleman raised that point, because I've been raising this point over and over again. And the worst example of lack of planning and failure to develop human capital in villages is in the indigenous community. I have been to the Rupununi, South Rupununi, repeatedly. And nothing hurts me more than if they're building a road, or they're just paving a road or leveling a road in a village in the South Rupununi. So when you have any idea how far Aishalton is from Guyana, Aishalton is an hour and a half from Georgetown by plane. It takes you close to 12 to 15 hours to get there. And you will go to that village and you will find, you go to that village and you will find contractors from the coast who've been given the contract to build roads in that community, and they bring the entire labor force from the coast. So if you're a young Amerindian, in the case of South Rupununi, you're young, whether you're a YY or you're from Manora now, you are a Wapishiana, you sit down and you watch young men your age, in their teens or in their 20s, doing work that you could be doing and improving their skills while you sit down and you have nothing. And this is after you sit down in a village in which the community school does not even qualify you to pass grade 6 or CXC. Just to let you know, Selvin, not unsurprisingly, we've just got blackout. So if we lose power here at some stage, I apologize, but it's because we've got a blackout.
That's all right, brother. Fate is on our side. I mean, it's about time for us to close off anyway. But you always have such interesting commentary and things to teach us and tell us that I don't mind going on for another few minutes.
I just wanted to, one point I want to add to the question that gentleman asked, which is this. You have to, if you're going to develop communities, you've got to you've got to make sure that you build human capital, human resources in those communities. So you've got to make sure that a certain percentage of the labor force at all levels, not just at the manual level, but at the technical level, if it's available, comes from the community. Because otherwise you can't build capacity in those communities. And the only way those communities will develop is if you build capacity.
Any parting words to the citizens of Guyana?
You know, actually, my parting word is my tagline for this election. Better must come. Better must come.
Better must come. And only the ballot can stop the bullet.
And only the ballot can stop.
Oh, that's a tongue twister there, Nigel. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you very much, Selwyn. As always, it's a pleasure being with you. And I say to your listeners who are kind enough to spend time and actually ask questions, I appreciate that. It's deeply, I deeply appreciate that. And just to let you know, I don't know if you know already, Lee Kuan Yew died. Lee Kuan Yew is very significant because Singapore and Guyana were at the same level in the 60s. That gentleman took Singapore from where it was to a first world country now, while we are still struggling somewhere between third and fourth. So I just want to say respect to Mr. Lee Kuan Yew for what he did, because he's demonstrated to us that it is possible.
It is possible. And on that note, my brother, have a good evening. And you need to leave the meeting. I can't shut off.
Okay, I will do that. Thank
All
you
right.
very much, and all the best.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Good night.